All right, so I'm looking at these numbers here and I'm super blown away with these results. Basically, 5x'd your income in 5 years, gone from 200 grand in assets in total, in net worth to $4.3 million in assets, just set on a third investment property. And I know that you've been kicking a lot of personal goals along the way. So Kayla, Gabe, welcome. So great to have you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the podcast.
Look, I think a good place to start is, sort of start at the start. When we first started talking, having conversations, where were things at for you guys? What was going on financially, and what were some of the things that were happening at that time?
Yeah, so I think when we had engaged with you, if we go around when we met in 2018, I think we started to really get on a roll with tracking our budgets and things like that. But I think before we had just joined with you, we were in this no man's land of do we invest in property? Do we go down the stocks path? We had actually invested $100,000 at that point in time when we had come onto your service through an ETF. And one of the funny stories is we actually put $20,000 on a crypto ETF at $12 per unit, and it went down to $4 straight away. So
how does that happen in the crypto bull run? It's crypto's gone up at 5,000%.
Yeah, exactly. At the moment, it's skyrocketing. Yeah. But that's sort of where we were before joining Pivot. We were very much what's our clear strategy to start really having this money that we started to earn compound future.
And clearly focused on building up your income at that time, something that you had been for a while. I know you passionate about tech and the opportunities that can come with that. We love working with people in tech sales because it's quite quickly you can earn some serious bank, and that creates some levers for you to actually do things, which I'm keen to get into some of those. But just going back at that time, what were some of the biggest sort of frustrations or issues, or what were the things that were not working the way that you wanted them to back then?
Yeah, I think for me it was the back and forth on the stocks versus the property. We're pretty well researched in terms of wanting to create wealth long term, but we didn't really have that full clarity on each of the execution steps.
Yeah.
Though we'd put things in place, and I think we're quite high agency, so it's you put the hand on the hot stove, it's we probably shouldn't have done the crypto ETF, but investing in ETFs is actually a really good way to go.
100%.
So there was a lot of that dialogue in the household, and then it was just let's settle the dust and actually go and get some proper advice, because at that point we'd invested in the first 2 investment properties, and we were on that, and we appreciated the leverage and the theory around that. But then to actually have a team of experts around us to say, well, here's your scenario, build that relationship with the team. Bonnie doing all the models and actually working out the scenario planning as to life can evolve. It just gave us that full clarity on we're on the right path directionally, but let's just tweak a few things and then start executing in a way that's meaningful to us.
Yeah, and particularly I think when it comes to debt, and debt is a little bit scary. I think it's probably the boomers generation's fault that they sort of drill it into you that debt's bad and you should have no debt. But from the numbers that it's it is a really powerful way to build your assets up. But you need to obviously manage risk and do it in a comfortable way, or a way that you're comfortable is not going to impact too much on your lifestyle or ability to do the other things that you want. I find that for a lot of people, particularly when it starts getting into that, maybe they're okay. Everyone's a little bit fearful, let's face it, when you buy any property and take on that debt. But you reach a threshold and then it's you really need to get some validation. Do you feel like that's...
Yeah. Well, when going on this journey together as a relationship, Gabe's very high risk and I'm very low risk. Mm-hmm. And so that's a whole dynamic in itself of where should we invest in getting on that same path of our goals for the future.
Yeah.
And when we joined Pivot, because we had purchased the 2 properties within the first year, we were coming up to our first tax time with that. And because our incomes had increased, there was that whole new thing that we hadn't experienced around tax optimization and things like that. So that was really helpful to go through.
Yeah, and so we're going into what you're saying there, that because you've got different sort of approaches to money, prior to us going through the planning process, how did you guys figure stuff out when it came to having those conversations?
Throwing spaghetti at the wall, wasn't it? It's just
I remember the team at Pivot, because you guys consult very well, and we're all on the one call, and it's Kayla, what do you want to get out of it? Gabe, what do you want to get out of it? And then you come to this neutral agreement, and then you sort of build out the models there.
Yeah.
But I think, prior to it, Gabe was very like in the startup world and wanting to invest in VCs and these more higher risk things. And I was still learning that side of it. But yeah, we came to a...
Yeah, I mean, even prior to working with Pivot, it was very much like, I think we oscillated almost around like a values-based conversation together. Like what, my personality type, I have a lot of confidence in being able to, build a future for myself. And then now I'm in a partnership with Kayla, and I've got to consider somebody else in the household in a partnership to build that future. And that personality style is very different, and it can be for a lot of couples.
Yeah.
So then it was just the dialogue around individual but joint values, and then what do we want to get out of life together, and almost a recalibration for me anyway, because I was just like, let's just throw... I think I remember reading a book at the time just around like more of the philanthropic endeavours for people when they sort of get to that point. And I'm just like, we should donate. I'm going to donate 80% of my income to charities. And I was like, absolutely, we are not doing that.
I think that is a key piece, though, is like how you were brought up. And like I feel very much like attached to money. Like if like I'm now getting more comfortable with spending it more, whereas Gabe definitely has that like we could just build it again, we could make it again. So it's just like...
So much of that like generational, the money beliefs. We've actually just had a money coach on the podcast, and some of that stuff, it sort of blows you away. But it's like you have these experiences that it's often not even you, it's your parents have these things that happen when it could be, a bankruptcy, or it could be that they, had super rich parents, and it just tends to flow through and show up in like the weirdest ways as well. But there is a lot of that. For us, I think that, it is really like it's natural that everyone's got their own individual preferences, their own individual goals when it comes to money. But one of the biggest things for a couple is that you've got to go, okay, well, here's all of my, we've got two people, they've got this set of personal priorities, but then you've got to make decisions and set those priorities, the list as a couple as well. And so for, that means that some of them you might go, well, actually that's less important to me, but maybe that's more important to us as a unit. But then you get aligned. And I know, like, even for me, when I talk to my wife, it is really easy to go, well, I think I got this, in control, or I feel this certain way. And so you don't talk about it, or you avoid it, or you start talking about it and it's too hard. And so you just move on. Whereas like, if you know that you've got a 60-minute conversation, at the end of that conversation, you've got to agree on some stuff, then it does sort of bring that to a head. And I don't know if it makes it easier, but it makes it more effective.
Yeah. I mean, even at the start, Kayla was very pro-property and I was very anti-property. I think I even remember like way back in the day saying to a friend, like, I'm never buying property unless I buy it outright, which is just like the complete opposite way to think about leveraging
and I think
property.
When I was into property, it was definitely like owning my own occupier as well.
And but it's just like that journey of learning, and then you get the expertise, and then you have that dialogue, and it helps to build that clarity around it.
Yeah. And so what was the turning point? What made you really decide that something needed to change?
Yeah, well, I think if I go back from as young as I can remember, I've definitely been like, how can I earn more money, or like sort of obsessed with money in a good way, I think, of just like trying to make my lifestyle better. And so I think when we first, like our values were pretty aligned when we got together of like wanting to, invest. We just didn't know where to start. And I think a lot of the education out there on podcasts and books, it's very like American centric. So it's hard to find that Australian centric like education. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, reading like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then, you come across Ben Nash and you read Unstuck. And it's just like you get the sort of home truths around why Australia is unique and the tax system and things we should consider. And then you learn a lot more about marginal tax rates and just like, okay, well, position is unique. And then that's sort of the journey. We probably got to that inflection point after about 6 years or so where we're like, let's actually go and just build a bit of a snowball effect from where we had come from, particularly with the properties and then the earnings. And then we also wanted to round out things like having ownership in our current companies and things like RSUs and ESPP. And Kayla's at a startup with options, and there's all these other considerations that were just way out of our ball game. Yeah. And yet alone did we have the time to really go through that.
It can be hard. There's so much complexity, and everyone's, you're busy, particularly if you focus on trying to crank up your income and like live a life and actually get some downtime and do the things that you want to do. Hard to balance all of those things. What do you think was the sort of the hardest part of getting started, if you think about getting some advice and support?
Yeah, so we did kick off with a financial advisor back like 4 years ago, and then me and Gabe were chatting last night, like what's some of the models that we went through with Pivot of like what is our end state. But I think the thing is, like life changes so radically that as long as you're like making monthly progressions I think that's the key point, because we have like 3 models that we could play out in the 7 to 10 years, and whether that's working now 3 days a week or retiring, selling down the properties. But I think as long as you're charging ahead, I think that's what's really important, that you're in the right direction.
Yeah, and that I suppose, that you're not cutting yourself off from certain options, or at least that you know that you're doing that as well. It's like with some people, if they make a decision around, say, purchasing a property, that they know that that's going to consume their borrowing capacity for a period of time. That's bad if it comes as a surprise 3 years down the line when you decide that you want to buy another property. But if you know before, and then you can make the decisions, then you're clear, and then you've set, the good thing about having a higher income is that it means that you've got more, you're not really necessarily saying no to some good options, but at least what those guardrails are.
When we purchased our first property through the Henderson Group, and when we actually engaged with them with the start, it actually took us a year to come back to Jack and actually buy the first property. So it definitely takes time, like lots of conversations. But I think we got to that point where we started to have a lot of cash in the bank, and it was that pivoting point of like, if we just keep sitting it in the bank, like nothing's going to compound. So it was like that push that made us to start going down that route.
And so do you think it was just that, or do you think it was more than that sort of stopped you? Because this is a common one that we see with people, and we know that like when you don't take action, that there's an opportunity cost, and that compounds every week, every month that you don't do anything. You guys seem pretty dialed in with stuff. You've obviously found a good person in Jack, conversations, but it still takes a year to get there. What is it? What is the barrier?
For what part? Like getting started with the financial advisor? I don't know, it was probably good timing. Like we were coming at the new financial year was about to start, and I think we just came to that point. I was probably sick of just doing heaps of spreadsheets on my weekend and convincing Kayla
That's
that
what
we
I
should
do
put
every
more
weekend.
money
There's
into
nothing wrong with that.
The key
Exactly.
thing though as well was like the past 3 years, pretty much we had to pay within 10 to 30,000 back to tax. So that was like one thing, and we're like, how can we optimize that?
Yeah.
And I think if you talk about like the tech ecosystem, which you would work with so many folks in the tech space, is like, are you with a company that's IPO'd, or is it a startup? And then how are you navigating shares and getting advice on like, am I getting the right amount of shares? And that's a big risk in itself of like working at a company and waiting for it to IPO or get bought out as well.
Yep.
So it was definitely in that part where we started to like, there wasn't many books on that, because it's very unique to each person, which is really important.
Yeah, 100%. And those, it's funny how those ATO assessment notices get you really focused, when it's like, I should do something about my money, and then you don't, and then it's like, bang, there's a tax bill, and you're like, fuck, what happened there? And then if you still haven't done anything by the time that next tax year comes, then it happens again. And this is it's the double-edged sword of the tech side of things, that you get this big opportunity, but that does come with some issues if you're not clear on the rules, not managing it, not part of your plan. Thankfully for you guys, it didn't turn into a problem, but for some people it can, because if those bills creep up on you and you don't know, that they're coming, and you're invested into assets, then you're forced to sell investments. That can actually cost you quite a bit of money. Yeah,
and definitely back to like the hand on the hot stove. It was that pain, like sort of the past year of like, what are we doing wrong, or are we optimizing this to be able to take that jump forward? And so that was like a big reason why we got into Pivot.
Yeah, nice. And so what surprised you guys the most about going through the process?
It's not that I think just like how much life does change. Like, you can say, I'm going to have kids in 2 years, and then like if we'll follow this model, like that just doesn't happen in reality, especially like myself and Gay, we've moved a fair bit around Australia. So I can't think of anything worse than like just thinking of the same thing for 7 years. Yeah. And I think that has made me be okay with the instability of like what life could be, as long as you're on the right track. But I think the biggest takeaway too was we're just we were consistent in like a savings rate, which we've been saving 50% year on year for the past like 7 years together. We've maneuvered our life around to be able to keep continuously doing that, whether that was living in a studio, moving back in with parents, so we don't have that lifestyle creep to get ahead as well. But I think the big thing is like how much money we're now putting into bonds, stocks, and property, and that's been like a really key format of when we get paid every month, where are the buckets of money going to.
Love that. And so in terms of what you're expecting, like thinking about going through the actual process of getting financial advice, was there anything that was sort of like a little bit unexpected, or that played out in a way that you didn't think it would?
Just probably the comprehensiveness for me, and just the real details around each individual scenario. Like for me, separately to Kayla, and then together, and then tax is a really good example of that, because then we're able to pull different levers to actually get the outcome on like optimizing tax, for example, because it's like a joint household, whatever else. Then overall, though, the process at the start, working with the team from like a relationship building perspective, and then just nurturing us through the structure and sort of the way you guys go about servicing your clients was a great pathway for us, because it was structured enough but flexible enough for us to get all the details but not, you know, get that reinforcement. And then I think also the statement of advice too was a great document for us to have up front, because it was a bit of a guiding reference point for us through the whole year. And then we could always sort of recalibrate and come back to what was that thing we had agreed on at the beginning, and oh no, we're actually really directionally in the right way again. So.
Yeah, we definitely pulled that up, like monthly ticking off things. And I think when I reflect back now on, you know, why you truly wanted to go with get a financial advisor, is we definitely hit that point where we knew we were starting to make good income, but we were just like, not that there needs to be an end goal, because like I feel like I want to continuously working forever, but that saying of like I want to be able to do it, then not need to be able to do it, was such a driving force for me to like sort my money out. But I think both myself and Gabe felt just so confused what it could look like in 7 to 10 years in terms of like modelling that out. So that's what we were able to do. And then part of that SOA, which was, I feel like this was like the most exciting part for me, and I have no idea why. I just tell everyone about it now, is when you could, if you hadn't topped up your super from like 5 years ago, you can go back and do that. And when they were the little things of what we'll be able to optimize in tax to be able to have like a net positive on our tax return too this year.
Yeah, nice. It's a good one. It's gives you a chunky little tax deduction as well, which is good. And so what were the key shifts? You mentioned a few things there already, but the financial shifts that we made together. So catch up super contributions, plan around third property. What were the other changes that happened?
Yeah, the big one for you, ESPP.
Oh yeah, the ESPP with just my employer. I get RSUs as part of the package, but then it's also the ESPP that I can enroll in, which helps then take sort of the 15% of the 6 monthly pay, and then allocate that into the shares, and then I sell those straight away. And it's also a tax benefit, but it's also a way to diversify the income streams too, because I've got technically risk in my employer, because there's different income streams there. But that was a really cool bit of advice that's been put in place now, and every time too, because also the company keeps growing and the stocks keep going up at the moment. There's always dips and stuff. There's always upside there, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little free. It's sort of like free money, although the cash flow management side of things can be a little bit tricky and something that you need to be aware of. But most of them come with a level of upside that's pretty much guaranteed, so long as you manage, you know, when you're buying and when you're selling the right way.
Another big one for me in the stocks realm too was because we'd had experience in the stock market, maybe questionably whether it was the right strategy or not, and we'd also learnt a lot about ETFs. You know, the pivot team was really instrumental in also helping us outside of the company stocks with RSUs and ESPP, but also then into what is a managed fund and fundamentally what the Vanguard High Growth ETF is, through a managed fund, and also then diversifying that with bonds as well as more defensive assets. So having that sort of spectrum across the stock market, as well as like investments in companies, plus all the other assets across the full financial picture, is something that I was personally looking for, because I wanted that holistic sort of rounded out strategy, but also doing it in the right way with the right option. And it simplifies it when it's just in the one sort of fund.
Yeah. And for me, the other few things that we took out of the sale was I was able to go pivot onto like the PayG model, so getting a bit more cash flow from the properties, then getting like it back at the end of the year with the tax. Also because Gabe is company's already IPO'd, whereas mine was like a startup company. We've just been, intent of being acquired. So there was a whole thing there of like, do I buy all the stocks now or do I wait? And like, what's the benefit for me around that piece? So that was helpful. Yeah,
some pretty chunky tax savings as well up for grabs when you get that right. And tax is a really big thing. You touched on a few things there already, but like, you know, getting the right assets, that's one part of the equation and a really important part, but the right assets in the right structures, you know, bonds, you know, super, do we use that? Do we use trusts or companies and those sorts of things? And that gives you a bit of a benefit now, but it's like the benefit that you get down the line, really significant.
And part of that soul was just making sure that we're investing in the right supers. So that was another piece to it. But also because Gabe does make more money than me, it's like when we go to tax time, how do we best both optimize that, you know, whether, you know, you can claim back even going with a financial advisor who takes that and things like that to be able to optimize that piece to it as well.
To your point too, Ben, the bonds is really cool, I think, which is like having a 10-year outlook and then the tax benefits that come with that. I can't explain it fully,
100%.
but I mean, maybe from your perspective, it's just like, I was like, oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, capital gains tax free when you hold your shares for 10 years or more, which is a really significant benefit when you think that, roughly you say share portfolio is like a 10% return. Half of that is growth, half of it is income. If that's 5% and that's getting taxed on the way through, you're paying probably 47%. If you're getting into the top marginal bracket, that takes 2.5% off your return. With a bond, you don't pay that at all. And so that 2.5% makes a really big difference over the 10 years. But if you keep it going, which a lot of people do, then the benefits just compound even more. Like you see a lot of those examples in the super side where they're like, if you can get 1% more return, you're going to have like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars more at the end. But like bonds are like that, except they're on steroids, and you can still access them. Like if you need to, they're there. There's nothing that really stops you. So it's like you're no worse off, but you're potentially like a lot better off as well. And they're pretty cheap as well. Like it's not like you have to pay thousands of dollars to set these things up as well. And the other thing is that it gives you it's just got that little barrier there as well. So you may at some point dip into your investment account, although a lot of people don't, but you may. But with a bond, you've just got that extra little step that you like, and you don't really want to lose the tax benefit. So you just find a way for it to not be a thing that you actually think about as well. We find that with a lot of people.
What are you laughing at?
Well, psychologically, it's funny because when we did the ETFs, I always had this underlying feeling of, yeah, we can just pull it out. And I actually think property has been so good for that because it's like you can't just, sell a property easy or whatnot. So it's actually been really helpful to be able to think much more longer term around that.
I love that. And so what do you think now, like in terms of the results? And I know that you had a lot of options before, but what do you think what's possible for you guys now that maybe wasn't before going down this path?
Gosh, great question. I think it just gives us a lot more options in life. And the fact that we've got a financial position at this point, even just as you were talking before, Ben, I was just like, it's actually just cool to me how money works and how over that long term and the compound and whatever, eighth wonder of the world and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, exactly. The compound compounds. It's just like, we actually have a lot more freedom in a sense to really choose the life that we want to live. And I think that comes back to the action perspective and getting started as early as possible, because it does make a really big difference at the 30-year mark, 50-year mark and things like this. Yeah. But then just for me, it's like the outlook for the next 10 years is like, well, I have this really solid financial platform now to really build upon and potentially take bigger risks. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's just like, it just set us up for success in a lot more of a bigger, more meaningful way than what I thought was even possible, having not been at this point.
Yeah, I think for me, it always comes down to like the self-improvement factor. And I truly believe like everyone in the world, if they can just be more themselves or be more authentic, not that money is the only way, but I do really think when you get that option to be able to want to do things and have to need to do things, you get to experience life in a very different way. And I can see that. Obviously, we got 3 properties now. There's a mortgage to pay, but when you start to see where that could go in the future, it actually gets you way more excited about life, that you're not sort of trapped in that hamster wheel, as they say.
100%. And when you've got a long horizon, it's simply just a matter of time. Like, so long as you've got good assets that set up in the right way, then it's not if it's going to happen, it's just when and sort of how much. Following on from that, is there, and it maybe this is too early, but has anything changed in the ways that you're using your money, the money that's not going into like investments and stuff?
This year, so every year we've had a 50% savings rate. And obviously over the past 5 years, we have increased our income. So there's been a factor there of like this year we wanted to save $250,000 after tax, and that's like not even including like the repayments back on the mortgage and things like that. Mm-hmm. And this year we set aside a goal of like going on more holidays. So I've started to do that a little bit more. But I would say the chapter of life that we're certainly in is just still like go really hard and being able to optimize all the money that we can invest in at the moment.
Mm. Well, it's going to give you even more options, into the future with that for sure. What do you think overall? And you mentioned a ton of stuff there, but what has been like the biggest win from getting got the right support around property, got the right advice overall?
What do you reckon, Kay? I don't know. A story that came to mind for me is like people generally have this sort of fantasy around generating passive income, not having to work or whatever the case is. But it's like if you truly ask yourself sort of the philosophical question, or like, what would you actually do with your time if you're not working?
Yeah.
That sort of narrative sort of brought me back down to not only like what's important in life and where I spend my time, but it's just like that income number, if you are living below your means and, you know, you're going about life in the right way, it's actually not that hard to achieve if you put the right things in place. And so I think that's just been like the big unlock for me over the last year or two, which is to say I don't have to sort of burn the candle on both ends, and I have these goals for the future and all this sort of stuff. But it's just like having that confidence and that reassurance now that, again, that financial platform's there to continue building upon, and then just having, you know, more meaningful endeavours through 100%. The things that I choose to do.
Yeah, and definitely where we've come from and being brought up like just two very regular Aussies and come from more low socioeconomic to where we are now growing up. And I do feel like not that I've made it or whatever, but because I've got started, I'm maybe a little bit further than some other folks. And, you know, I even reflect on my sisters and things like that. It's so empowering now to be able to like get them excited about you can do it too and just get started. So it's been really awesome to have those conversations with people.
100%. And I think like for a lot of people that people talk about a 50% savings rate, and, you know, congratulations, because that is a huge thing to do. But a lot of people think that the benefit of saving 50% of your income is that you're saving 50% of your income. And that's a good benefit. But the other benefit is that you're only spending half of your income, which means that if you want to be financially free, you only need half the amount of money that you know, your colleagues that are spending all of their money or most of their money actually need as well. And so, you know, it's not an easy thing to do, but it gives you power on both sides of the ledger as well. So, you know, just for anyone that's listening in, there's more than one way to get there. What do you guys focus on now? Like looking forward from here, what's next?
What's next? That's a golden question, Ben. I think, I mean, we always sort of joke about going faster or, you know, doing more and these sort of things. So I think we're sort of feels like what's like a next sort of transition phase in life that's about to come. For me, like understanding what wealth means, it's financial, yes, but it's also like time, energy, and it's like the freedom to choose what you want to do. And so for me, sort of as I move up the stack of different careers and what wealth means, it's like I'd love to be an entrepreneur and have my own company. And so I'm looking to put those things in place, and then that changes the financial picture again, and we've got to give Bonnie another call and, you know, go back through the rigmarole of sort of getting to that position. But certainly, you know, we're still really young, and I think we're taking different steps now to sort of build towards, you know, just even that end state, not even really the end state in life, but it's just like, I think we're always really reflective on like, how do we want to improve our current situation? And if we asked ourselves that every single month, which we sort of have been doing for 7 years and even before we met, it's like we've gotten ourselves to this position. So if we can take that same sort of rate in the future, then it's just like, you know, what's sort of possible. But for me personally, I'd love to, you know, be a CEO of a really impactful company and have a great team and make real value in the world and on people's lives. And I think there's no better way to do that than to be an entrepreneur and take the experience that I have. And then that, you know, ties back to the wealth in all of those domains as I described it before.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
I'll be calling you Ben. Help.
Yeah, I think for me I've never been the most talented or smartest, but like I know I've been consistent, whether that was in sport or training or anything like that. And I think what I'm excited about is just doubling down on exactly what I'm doing now. And I think when you reflect on your days, which we talk so much around what do we want our weeks to look like, months to look like, and just every single day, it's how do you keep optimizing that to do more of the things you want to do than, you know, you have to do. And whether that was, you know, we were able to, you know, talk about how, now that we have more money, what would you spend it on? It's like I'm very much like, let's get the sauna. And I remember telling myself when I was like 16 years old, if I could get a massage every week, I've made it. And I always anchor myself on those little things. So it's just being able to, you know, stay grounded, gratitude, and just keep doing what we're doing, because when we did do the models, like in 7 years, we have some pretty cool options ahead of us if we keep doing what we're doing for the next 7 years.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the consistency beats like smarts every single time. And it sounds like, you know, from all of what you said, like even the fact that you're structured and have these conversations monthly, a lot of people know that they should do that. Not that many people do. And I think for a lot of people, when they're getting started, they think that everything needs to be perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to do something, build it with just the tiniest bit of momentum. Then you've got that momentum, you can build on that from there. And as long as you just keep going and you don't let the wheels fall off, you're going to end up in a really good place.
I also appreciate everyone's relationship is very different in how they share bank accounts and all that. But being very open, that me and Gabe were very transparent from the start around like optimizing both our incomes, what we were earning, and being able to invest in the same things. So that's been helpful from the get-go of having those hard conversations when we first met to align on our values as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways to be right when it comes to your money management and your investing. But I think the key is transparency there, as you said, that some people want to have joint bank accounts. Other people like to have their own bank accounts or some sort of combination. And it's not to say that any way is right or wrong, but for you to be on the same page, you've got to have the right information, I suppose, or the same information so that then you can actually move this stuff forward as well. I just wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about advice for other people that it might be thinking about going down this path, particularly when it comes to advice. A lot of people don't know how it works or what to expect or, whether it's going to be scary or the costs and those sorts of things. What would your advice be for someone that was sitting on the fence?
Yeah, when we got started with the financial advisor journey, I think we've had some bad experiences and we've had now a really great experience. So like the first lesson there is like never be, don't if you've had a bad experience, like try again. Because like I think we can all have bad experiences in life, but if we keep, we've always got positive things going on because that's why we keep improving. So when we also went with Pivot, like there's about a month there where we just like are doing coaching, like learning about one another, learning about our personality. So it's not this like fast tracked consulting piece that we go through to like, you tell us what we need to do. It's very much how do we want to live our life and how do we come together to be able to go and optimize that financial position.
And not forced to make, you're not forced to make decisions and to do it fast. There's a lot of sort of chocks that need to get into place before you get there.
Yeah, and during like when we went through the service, like there was many moments where me and Gabe had these random ideas and we would call up Bonnie and the team and I'd be like, we're not making a decision, like we're going to go chat with Bonnie. And so we would make sure that we get consulted before making any actions, which was really helpful.
It's so annoying when I'm like, let's put 200K into a fund and invest in really high-risk startups through VC. I was like, let me call Bonnie.
Yeah. We'll put it in a model to tell you it's not a good idea.
Let's give you the actual data points. The way I would answer that question too, Ben, from my perspective is like, back to the point about making decisions and having the right information, sometimes for me what has been helpful is just having the cooler story. So it's like the 50% savings rates just sounded astronomical. It was just like, okay, well, if the average in Australia floats around 4 to 5%, it's like that's just like a huge benchmark and it sounds really cool. And then, you sort of drill into the numbers and if you're earning 100K and you're saving 50K, like it's whatever the numbers are, it can be really different and really variable for other people. But for me, I had that North Star of like 50% savings rate would be a really cool story to tell and inspire others to do something similar, or it's like the art of the possible of doing that. Yeah. And even other sort of data points or cool stories around like, 5x the income in 5 years. It's like a really cool tagline. And again, it's just like a bit of a wow factor of like, okay, well, there's something here to unravel. But I found that was helpful for me and for us because it just gave us that North Star that simplified something and it could get us on that roll and get that action and that inertia.
And based on both our personalities, I would happily pay someone just to tell me what to do, whereas Gabe would happily pay someone to go in the most detailed of devils to be able to learn the right information related to her. And so like some of the sessions I would honestly jump off because I'm like, this is just so deep of the data we're going into. But once Gabe understands that, she feels really confident.
Yeah. And it's important that, particularly in a relationship, it's like you've got to address both of those things. Otherwise you're going to be stuck and not able to move forward. The other thing is about like financial advice. Obviously it costs money unless you get cheap or free advice, which typically costs you more. But so, what would you say for people that are considering, will investing in some financial advice be worth it?
Yeah. So when we even went through going through a buyer's agent, that was the first time we spent money to be able to, like, it's a bit of a nerve-wracking thing. I was definitely nervous. Like, are we really spending this much money? Can we not educate ourselves? And then the next thing that we invested quite heavily in, which was our probably highest investment into ourselves, I would call it investing in a financial advisor, is investing in yourself. It was the biggest thing I'd put down on ourselves to do. And pretty much during that whole time, as you go through understanding why the value is there is because we were able to look at all these levers we can pull if we go with a financial advisor, and at the end of it, we're able to actually 5x the return of our current spend in it. So it makes me want to continuously be able to do that, to be able to optimize other areas, because we don't have time, researching tax things and new loopholes that are coming out, or not even loopholes, but just the rules around what you can do around that stuff. So now that I've experienced that, it's one of those things where it's worth paying.
Yeah, I think also the free advice and like the rise of the finfluencer on the socials, and like there's always a vested interest. They're either sponsored or it's like, they're building attention to be able to sell or something like that. There's like, there's you sort of look under the covers as to if the advice is free, or the classic thing about social media platforms is like, if you're not paying for it, like you are the product. These kind of mental models help you to understand, is it worth me spending my money to get proper financial advice? And the answer is always yes, because you can prove the ROI then, and you can see that in spades when you actually see the numbers. Similar to property with what Kay was saying, is like if I spend 20, 30K on a buyer's agent, but they are able to help me get to a 3 million portfolio, and I've been able to see 75K land in my bank account only 3 months later so I can buy the next property, it's really worth the investment. And the same thing applies. And you guys do it really well, where it's like you could spend the service fee, but you're going to see the ROI and where we can actually find that uplift in your return. It's really black and white in that sense. And so it's just a different paradigm of thinking about it.
And time definitely gets muddled, but now I reflect, another story that came to my mind is like we definitely spoke to like 5 different financial advisors. We read the books of the folks like your book and things like that. And one key piece was like when we went with Pivot is that when you give us advice, like you're not tied to those other ecosystems of partners and things like that, which was all the advice is purely focused on what's best for us.
Whose advice was the most expensive out of the 5? Would have been us, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that a lot of people don't see, but it's like if you can have, I always forget the saying, but it's like, good and cheap, but you can't have cheap and good. Like it just doesn't actually work like that. That it's either that they've got to supplement the fees by having those relationships, or they're going to not give you all of the stuff, then go to the level of detail. And a lot of people, and I have this conversation all the time with people, and they're like, oh, it should be pretty simple. Can't you just build a little model? I was having it with a mate the other day, and it's like, it's pretty straightforward, but it's like, well, no, because actually to do that, you've got to, understand all of those inputs. We've got to understand them. We've got to stress test them. You've got to understand how it works. We've got to talk about the goals. We've got to do the things. And then it's like, that's a whole bunch of hours to do that as well. But I wish that more people understood it, because from the outside, it's like, that it ends up being a barrier for people, that they just go, oh, well, I don't know. And because we can't say exactly what it's going to be, we can say to people when we think it's really clear that there is going to be this good upside and it's going to happen pretty quickly, but we can't say that we know what it is, because we don't know what you're going to choose until we help you understand the option so that you can actually choose it.
Back to when why we started with the financial advisor was that whole pain point around, if we don't start investing today, we're just losing time. And it felt like if we started to go down this one path and we're not doing the right thing, you're also losing time there. So like that upfront payment is worth it than, wasting time, because like compounding is all about time.
100%, especially when you're starting to build a bit of momentum as well. You've got a little bit behind you that the time costs you even more as well.
Why do you think most people don't get started, Ben? Like, what are the key objections that you hear?
It's like for one of the really common ones that we sort of struggle to get some people past is really the cost, and they go the cost, is it going to be worth it? And often for some people, if you're in a really like a modest situation, we're pretty upfront and say, look, this is where we think the value is going to be. We think over the long term that's likely to be huge. In the short term, maybe it's not that huge. But for some people, it's like they've got so much stuff going on that we're like, my God, it's just so obvious that there's going to be a ton there. But people, I think it's actually more of maybe a mindset thing, that people want certainty. Like some people just need certainty more before they make decisions. But what they don't realize is that often it's like you guys work in sales, right? It's like all of the decisions that they made to get to this point, the approach that they've taken to this point has led them to a point where they're frustrated because they're not where they want to be. So then they start looking at solutions, but then they try to assess those solutions against the way that they've acted for the last however long, which has led them to exactly what they are. So it's like a really circular thing. But it's like I wish that we could show people what they were going to do before they had the plan, because as you guys see that we quantify what is the immediate upside, what is the longer term upside, and then what are the actual results upside over time. So it's all there in black and white. There's no hiding from that. And we don't want to say to someone it's going to be there and then they get there and then they go, why I've got no upside or I've gone backwards. Like that's a conversation that we just as a business are just not interested in having with anyone. And so, but we can't help them understand what it is until they choose that they want to do the investment bonds and the ETF portfolio and the third property and the whatever the savings rate is, so.
Yeah. We're both just reading the book at the moment, 10X is easier than 2X. And and it talks about how, you got to leave almost your old life to be able to create the new life. And, this is more of like why we also made the jump and, what comes next for us. It is taking that leap of faith because like what you've been doing is currently still in your position. So it's just like you got to do something pretty radically different to make your life.
I really like that.
Different.
I'm not familiar with that, but that actually makes a lot of sense because if you're just trying to do the same thing but maybe a little bit better or a little bit differently, it can be really hard. But if you know that you've got to do such a big leap, then you know that you've probably got to change a whole bunch of things. So you taking notes over there, Siobhan?
The thing I think is where you are now is the thing that's going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. You can just like throw some quotes at all of those people, Ben, like on the carousels or something, like, whether it's the Einstein quote of like definition of insanity or it's the Mike Tyson until you get punched in the face.
We just got through those sometimes.
Throw them all out there.
Look, it's a journey. The good news is, it took you guys a year to, started and then you got there and now you're advocates and, it's so awesome to see all of those results. You said you haven't made it. I think by a lot of people's standards you might have, but even if you haven't, you've got all the ingredients to know that you're going to get there with that approach as well. So thank you guys so much for sharing your story. Just before we go, one of the things we just sort of glossed over a little bit at the start, but is the fact that you guys have, 5x your income in that time. And I know, Kayla, that's something that you're quite passionate about, tech sales and helping people. And for me, I think, there is a lot of talk and it's sort of like, there's a lot of shit online from people as well. And they're like, I can't do it. I can't do anything. You can't get ahead in this country. It's impossible. And I know you've been on, Jack Henderson's podcast lately, and he's quite, I suppose unique in the way that he tackles that message. But I very much like him with perhaps a little bit of a softer approach to it. But I believe that anyone can increase their income and put themselves in a really strong position when they work at it. And I know you're doing some stuff in this space. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, from background, like started at KFC, didn't finish high school, and so sort of went through a rigmarole of different roles to eventually land in technology sales today. I was actually introduced to that via Gabe, and Gabe was 7 years in the Army and then transitioned into technology sales as well. And I've now been in it 5 years, and it's completely transformed like the way I live, the culture of people I'm engaging with. And I think when I grew up, it certainly wasn't an industry that was spoken about or taught. And I think the word sales is obviously very cringe to a lot of folks. I actually quit my I quit my first job because it was sales, and I thought people will come over to me and if they want it, they'll buy it. And it's just like so far from the truth. But when you do take that slant of, you're the consultant, you're helping educate and things like that, it's actually a very exciting role to be in. And I think with obviously where technology is in the world economics today, 100%. A lot of American and Europe companies are coming to Australia to grow their companies here, and it's a great time to get into that space.
And so you've got some resources and stuff that can help people, anyone that wants to 5x their income, of which I'm sure that there's probably a ton in the
Well, it depends on the mindset, Ben.
That's right. People that are ready to break to 10x. We need the 10x mindset here.
Yeah, but within 5 years, I was able to go from $60,000 to $350,000 in my income. But if you head over to Kayla Stanley on Instagram, you can go into my bio there, and there's a link where we go into about an hour and a half webinar of how you can actually get into the industry, how you can increase your income. And it's got a lot of resources there around which vendors to go after, which vendor is like a Canva or an Atlassian. Is that tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? And sort of what age bracket are you in, whether you're starting in a more junior role or a mid-tier level as well. So it has all that information over there to get started.
Love that. And we'll pop that up in the show notes as well. So definitely check that out. Kayla Stanley on Instagram. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. Really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys. We'll leave it there for today. Bye for now.